Hi, this is Melody LeBaron, and this is an Agents of Transformation interview. We're in December 2020, and we've survived the year. And I have with me a dear friend and colleague, Bettina Essert, and we are here to talk with you about transforming your environment. I met her through a women's empowerment process that we both facilitate. She facilitates the process not just for women, but also for girls. And she's just one of my favorite facilitators to collaborate with. B is also an herbalist. She is a shamanic body worker, and she is a certified space and personal clearing practitioner. She got her training through me, and she's a holistic organizer, and she also received some training for that from me. She's a guerrilla gardener, which I love. I call her when I have questions about my garden. And she and her husband share their time between a farm in the wild mountains of North Carolina, pretty close to me, and a beautiful, beautiful family home that's been in her family for several generations on the Elizabeth River in Southeast Virginia. So I'm really excited to welcome my dear friend, Bettina Essert. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melody. I'm really excited to do this.
Well, I knew that I really wanted to explore the idea of transforming space because, and I wanted to talk to you about it because you have the same kind of holistic perspective that I do, where you take into account your relationship or the client's relationship with the spirit of the land and the energy in the home. So I just want to, I'm curious how you got interested. I mean, I know, but I think our listeners would be interested in how you got interested in working energetically with environments.
Okay, so like Melody said in my intro, I live in a home that's been in my family for generations. I am the third generation of my family to live here, and my children are the fourth generation to live in this home. Um, and we have had this land in our family for well over 100 years. And in the course of 100 years, with any group of people, there's going to be trauma that happens on the land. And one of those things that happened was arsonists burned my grandfather's original home to the ground while he was at a film, a silent movie. Actually, it was a long time ago. I guess, oh, wow, it was about 100 years ago that this happened. And they burned his house to the ground, and he came home and his home was in ashes. And it was interesting when Melody first came to this land, I didn't tell her any of that. And she stopped and she said, "What happened here?" and immediately keyed into it. And there are many reasons why I want to clear the land that I live on. And part of that is I grew up on this land, running wild on it, climbing trees, playing with my dogs. I grew up in a generation where parents didn't really pay much attention to their children, other than to make sure they ate and had clean clothes and things. Like, we went out and played, and when it was time to come home, they rang a bell or turned on the porch light, and we knew we had to get back inside. And I was so and am so deeply connected to and attuned to this land and have worked with it for so long that and with the help of Melody and other people, I have created a resonance on this land that makes it feel vibrationally completely different when you step one step outside of this piece of land. People comment on it all the time. They don't know why it feels like it does. They just know that it feels so good when they arrive here. And it's been interesting for me as a person who's lived on a specific piece of land for most of my life to have this farm in Western North Carolina and to have to introduce myself to a different set of land spirits and do ceremony with the land and to make offerings to the spirits of the land. this is like really something that I'm just super passionate about, is just really communicating and respecting the ancestors on the land. And in that vein, I would like to say that my home is on the land of the Chesapeake people who lived in southeastern Virginia. This was ceremonial Chesapeake land. They are a people who were completely wiped out. My home in Western North Carolina is on Cherokee land, also known as Salagi land. I definitely honor the ancestors here and there with tobacco. American land spirits really love tobacco and corn, sometimes with some port. And there was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, well, I don't remember what it was, so that's it.
Yeah, it's really important to connect with the land in a respectful way. And, you know, we live on stolen Cherokee land. And whenever I do a space clearing, I feel what's happened, not just in the home or, you know, in the dwellings, but also on the land. And I can go back down in the timeline, and the original wound, which all the other stresses that have happened on a piece of land stack up on, is the land being torn from its native people. And of course, in this day and age, we're aware of the trauma of what happened to the people to be torn from their land. But we don't necessarily consider the trauma to the land. Consider that that imprint is in the land as well. And I really appreciate that I get to work with you, and that I get to work with someone who does understand that and who does know how to make the connection with respect, and to keep working with the land. When we moved into our current home, and my body has wanted to be back in the mountains since I was 5 years old and taken from the mountains. My happiest childhood memories, I've only lived for a year in my family's homelands, which are in southern Alberta, Canada. But every summer or every other summer, we would go back home and play in the Canadian Rockies. And the hum and the vibration of those mountains still lives in my body, in my memory. So I've wanted to move back to the mountains since then. And I've had 30 homes in my almost 66 years. And 3 years ago, we finally moved to the mountains of Western North Carolina, which we both love. And this is stolen Cherokee land. So for me to very slowly develop a relationship with the land. I have an altar in the center of the home. We'll talk about feng shui, but in feng shui, the center of the home represents health and unity of body, mind, and spirit, health and unity of everyone in the household and the family, and health and unity on the land as well. And so I've got an altar there that I describe to myself as healing cultural wounds, healing the wound of the land. And there's some beautiful things on that altar that represent my attempts and efforts to shift the collective consciousness around this, and my attempts and efforts to connect deeply with the land. And I know you have the same mindset. You do the same kinds of things on both properties.
Yeah, here, one of the things that I did is, this is another funny story. So my husband is a prospector, and I like sort of heartily disapprove of what he does with that, because I feel like he's really creating a lot of disruption in the land where he prospects. However, he goes up there and he moves these rocks, and he asks the rocks, he's like, do you want to come home? And if they say no, he puts them over there. And if they say yes, he puts them over there. And at the end of the day, he says, okay, who really wants to go? And whichever rock raises its hand, whatever, he puts them in the back of his little four-wheeler thing and he brings them home. And so, and they're white quartz stones. They're just beautiful, like milky white quartz. And I've asked for volunteers from those stones, and I have gridded the perimeter of what's my land and also the land that my family owns, but that my horses live on. And I have 8 specific points. It's an energetic grid that I activate, like they're lights that I can turn on. And they build a cone of energy above and a cone of energy below. And that's part of the thing that helps anchor the intention for the healing of this land. And I did this while my husband was away one weekend. My daughter and I went out and we did it. And we anointed the rocks with, wine and essential oils and flower essences. And we sang to them and did prayers over them and smudged them with smoke. And he came home and went to bed. And the next morning he got up and he said, I had the weirdest dream last night that you put rocks all around the house and a big teepee of light lit up and there was a glow and the whole place was just surrounded by this glow of energy, like that you did something that would protect us. And I was like, yes, it's real.
Yeah, it is. And, I've got in my last home, which was on a much bigger piece of land, I had altars with stones that I created at 8 points, and big trees were holding the energy of those altars. So the altars were at the base of each of these 8 trees that surrounded our home. And in June of 2017, we had decided that we were going to move from that home and we were going to find our retirement home. So we were going up and down the East Coast, interviewing mountains for the position of being our next home. And the morning that we were set to come up here and house hunt in this area, I came downstairs and into the kitchen, and there's a big picture window in that kitchen, and I saw the deer looking in like, what's going on? And I looked at the deer, and then I looked out behind them, and the summer solstice tree. So these 8 trees that were aligned with the directions and the energies of the 8 points of the wheel of the year. And the summer and literally we were the day before summer solstice, and the summer solstice tree had come down the night before. And I went in shock to the tree and I was like, what happened? Why? And the tree said, this land is letting go of you. This land is letting you know it's time to leave. And I took all of I had decorated each of the trees. And so I took all the ribbons and the crystals down from the tree, and I took the altar away from the tree, and my husband took care of taking the tree in pieces back to the woods so it could decompose. But it was really a heart experience of the land acknowledging that we were to move. And that was the day we made the decision it would be Western North Carolina, or, that whole trip. The next day, I guess it was when we made the decision. So, and many people will hear this conversation and it will feel surprising to them. But I would just ask them, I would ask our listeners to really go back in their own memory, go back in your own life experience and ask yourself, have there been any times, maybe when you were on vacation, very often we choose to go on vacation to the place, whether it's the mountains or the beach or the desert or the grasslands or the the bywaters. Like, we choose to our body finds the place that our body is the most comfortable, that would be the power place. And just ask yourself, when you were walking in the mountains or at the beach, do you feel like nature there is alive and intelligent and aware of you? And And so what Bettina and I are talking about is just an extension. We've both spent years studying with different teachers to enhance our own ability to tune in and to connect with the aliveness of the land we're living on, and to make that land sacred, to develop a relationship, a partnership with that land. So let's talk about why you decided to do the apprentice training, because
Okay.
when I visited your home the first time, we did find areas that were still left of trauma from the generations where the land has been in your family.
I would like to add one other thing, in that a lot of the gridding, or the, with your trees and my stones, etc., is really, it's a living prayer. It really just gives you a place to focus your attention and your prayer, to keep your mind actively involved in keeping your space clear.
To me, it's like these stone altars that I have around my home now are like jewelry. There are some pieces of jewelry that I've been given that have such profound meaning that every time I look at it, even if I'm not wearing that piece and I see it, it alters me in some way, up levels my mood, my energy, and it means something. And the stones have that same kind of energy. They are, like you say, a living prayer, a gift that we give the land that has meaning, that blesses the land, and it blesses us. It uplevels us when we look at the stones, when we think about the stones. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So feel free to remind me of what you remember or why you're asking me this question. But I'll tell you what I remember, which is this. So I lived in this house for, I think, about 7 years, um, and tried to get my father to sell it to me, and he would not. So my husband and I moved to a little farm in North Carolina, and then we moved back. And we were in such a rush to move both times that we did not declutter or sort anything. We loaded everything we owned up and went, and then we loaded, Dad decided to sell us the house, and we loaded up everything we owned, and we came back. And we had so much stuff, and we still have a lot of stuff. However, I am incessantly decluttering, and as the years go on, I become more and more merciless about it. I just, like, this is not my mother. I can keep this little thing that was my mother's until I die, and then my kids are going to have to deal with it, but it's not my mother, and just let it go and let it go and let it go. And so I really needed some specific advice on organizing and decluttering, but also I'm going to use the metaphor of the carpet in part of my house. So over the years, this house was my grandfather's house. Then it was my father's house. Then it was a women's health spa. Then it was a charm school, a modeling school. Then it was a wedding chapel. Then it was a catering business. Then tenants lived here. And when I called my dad in tears, begging him to let me move back because I hated living in the place we lived in North Carolina, um, as soon as my dad told them he would let them out of their lease, the woman packed up and left. And the man who was still living here stopped taking all of his medicine and just decided to die. And he didn't die here, but he went through a lot of physical problems. He was diabetic and he quit taking his insulin and he chewed his fingernails off. There were bloody handprints on the wall. There was urine all over the floor. It was really, really bad. The carpet was awful. And my dad, God love him, he's a brilliant, brilliant man. He should never be allowed to design a house or to make decisions about decorating ever. He has plenty of other things to make decisions about. He's 91. He just had surgery a couple of months ago, still goes to work every day. Like, he is amazing. However, when he does carpet, he puts the new padding and new carpet over the old carpet because he thinks the extra padding is good. And so in the hallway of, I'm pointing that way because I'm sitting in my house, but there was a layer of tar paper. So we have these beautiful heart pine hardwood floors. There was a layer of tar paper, a layer of astroturf, a layer of carpet padding, a layer of carpet, a layer of carpet padding, and another layer of carpet. And just imagine all of the dust and mold and mildew and spores and skin cells and hairs and other icky things that I won't name that were embedded in all of that. And the astroturf was there because there was a big pool outside and it was a health spot and people, they needed it to keep the floor from being ruined, but they didn't take it up when they put the carpet down. So like we had to peel all of that up and get rid of it in order to refinish the floors. And if you think about energy in a house, our emotional energy and the way it affects a home, it's very, very similar to the way that astroturf and, you know, like 6 layers of absorbent material affected the energy in that hallway. It's just not a good environment. We have to clear that stuff out sometimes in order to keep our spaces
Right.
vibrant.
Right. You know, I equate it to the stress that can happen to a physical body. So when you're in a car accident or when you have some kind of physical trauma to the body, the memory of that trauma is stored in the cells of the body. And yes, you can set a broken arm, but still the memory of that trauma will be there until it's released. And there are many forms of body work that can support the body releasing the memory and the tension that accumulates around that memory. Well, for a home, traumas and challenges accumulate and layer up, just like you've described the physicalness, and they need to be cleared for a family to move in and have a clean, clear experience without being affected by all of those memory imprints. So yes, I do remember when I think we were in the driveway when I said, "Oh my goodness, what happened here?" And you said, "Oh, this is the location of this home that burned." But inside the house, there were also many sort of energetic
Mhm.
blocks or I experience it as when a home has too much of these layers of memory, I experience it as a stagnant, heavy, darker frequency that really keeps the aliveness out of the home. Sometimes the chi, the life force, when I'm dowsing with my dowsing rod, won't even come in the front door because the home itself is so full. There's no more that can can come in. And so, you know, we went through that, I don't know how many months, maybe 6 or 7 months of your apprentice training with clearing. And I know that I do space clearings, obviously in person, like I did with yours, but I also do them remotely. Do you do space clearings remotely?
Yes. I actually feel like frequently they're more effective when I work remotely. Um, I'm less distracted
By the
by
items
what's
in the
going on
space.
around me when I'm in my own space.
Yeah, yeah.
It-
And so talk to us through the process of how you work with clients when they need a space clearing.
Okay, so I would originally do a consultation with them, a very brief consultation to ask what their needs are, what their intention is for their space, and also to be very clear about what I need, especially if I'm doing a distance clearing, what I would need. And for distance clearing, I really prefer to have a video of a walkthrough of a home. I would probably ask them to go either clockwise or counterclockwise through their home because that would be, I like to go around the edges when I go in and do a clearing. or at least in a specific direction through a space. And then I would do the clearing of a space myself without the client being in connection with me while I'm doing the clearing. And then I will write up as I'm going along, I'm taking notes about what I'm finding, what I'm feeling, where I'm feeling the energy's flowing, where I'm feeling it's tied up against the walls, where it feels blocked. And then I will send them a nice email with a great description of what I have done. Right now, I'm actually working in an office building, and it's a large office building. I've decided to go through by departments. And so I'm not telling all of the departments what I'm doing. The head of one of the departments came to me and asked me to do it because one of their specific offices has had the last 3 people die of cancer in that office. And these are this is an accounting department. These are not people who are particularly interested in energy work or any of this stuff, but they contacted me because they're really concerned about what's going on in there. And so I've connected with a couple of the department heads who seem open to this sort of thing, and the rest of them, I'll just go through and do their departments, and it'll just happen without them knowing, and we'll see.
You know, it's interesting. I had a real estate client once who called me for the very same reason. And he didn't tell me. He just said, I feel like there's stress here. And he didn't tell me exactly what it was, but I walked in the front door. Well, first we collaborated and talked about the issue. And then I went back outside um, and came in the front door of the real estate office with my dowsing rod, and it started indicating a stress immediately. It started whirling, indicating sinking chi, but it really got bad right at the receptionist desk. And when I tuned in and asked questions, there were 3 out of 3 kinds of geopathic stress that intersected right there. And I said, oh my goodness, there really can be health issues for someone sitting long periods of time over a stress like this. And he said, yeah, that's why I called you. The last 3 receptionists have died of cancer. So,
Wow.
there can be a tremendous amount of stress and a tremendous release or relief to the space when those stresses are cleared, and the people who live or work there are in deeper partnership with the land. Because for most Westerners, we might love walking in nature and hiking in the woods. We might love walking along the beach, but somehow when we enclose a space and we call it a home or an office building, the space inside becomes dead to us. We have no teachings and understanding of the space inside our home is as alive as the space in the forest or
I
at
read
the
a
beach.
wonderful book called Behaving as If the God and All Life Mattered by Michelle Small Wright, who actually lives in Northern Virginia. And she says that everything we create is a garden, including our homes, our furniture, our altars, all of it. And reading that book really, really shifted my perception on what happens inside a space.
Just as you talked about that book, this beautiful big eagle flew across the window here. I mean, right in front of me. It was gorgeous. I have to say that book really shifted things for me, because it describes in a Western way what my Indigenous teachers had taught me.
Mhm.
And it's so exciting to see that even Western people are starting to understand what, if we had grown up in any Indigenous culture around the world, we would have learned by the age of 3. Yeah, we would have grown up because, and we would have grown up with such a connection to the land. in, oh goodness, it must have been at least 10 years ago now, I attended the Ancient Wisdom Rising Conference, which was then held in Atlanta. And this is a conference that used to happen annually, where this group of scholars and anthropologists would pay to bring in indigenous elders from all over the world to this beautiful retreat center in different places around the country, to a beautiful retreat center in a natural setting. And then we would have fires at night, and we would sit at the feet of these elders, and they would tell us stories. And then during the day, there would be workshops taught by these elders. And I happened to attend a workshop taught by a member of the Oklahoma Cherokee. And he was an elder who had grown up separated from his family's ancient land. But he was still taught the stories of the places. And we did a walkabout on this retreat center land. And at one point, and he was elderly, I mean, he had a walker. We were moving very slowly through the woods and down by the river, very, very slowly. And he was talking about the trees and how they would use the acorns and all of these ancient ways that in Oklahoma, they didn't have those same trees, but he knew the uses for all of these, the bark of the trees and the seeds of the trees. Anyway, as we were down along the river and we were coming around a bend, before we came around the bend, he said, "Oh, my grandmother's had a story about this part of the river." And he told us the story, and he told us what we were going to probably find around the bend. And as we came around the bend, that's indeed what we found. And it was stunning to me that he had never been on that land, and yet he was so connected to it. And so I feel really blessed to have really learned from some amazing elders from all over the world, and really felt their deep connection. And when I came to your land, I realized you were the only white person I knew who had the same kind of connection, because the land where you live now was your playmate growing up.
Mhm. It's the truth. It really was.
Yeah. So let's talk about stuff, because most people on my list, and most people that I work with are also concerned, in addition to clearing the energy of their home and their land, they need some tips about clearing their items. So clutter clearing and organizing. I know you do that work with clients. Tell me how you do that work. Obviously, it's in person, right?
Yes. Yes, I would love to try doing it from a distance so that I don't actually have to get in there and do the work. I'm getting older and my body just doesn't quite put up with all the heavy lifting like I would like for it to. Um, oh gosh, it's so different for each client, Melody. Everybody's different. One thing that you do that was really helpful for me, and I don't even remember what you call it, so you can remind me, but it's working with the person's learning style or the specific way that they work with things in their lives. Like, I am a function over form person. I want my kitchen shelves to be open so that I can see where everything is. I want them to be organized by like item and genre, but I want them to be open. I don't want closed cabinet doors. So we're doing a kitchen remodel now. So I really am excited to have a pantry so that everything won't be like open to everybody's eyes. Um, but some people prefer for things to be behind cabinet doors. We all have our different ways of preferring to organize, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a system. When in the 80s, I had my youngest, one of my boys had a significant challenge learning. He was dyslexic. And so I learned neuro-linguistic programming. And neuro-linguistic programming says that we all have a learning strategy, we have a love strategy. And Logan's learning strategy, in addition to dyslexia, his learning strategy was kinesthetic. So if we have a visual learning strategy, and our school system in America is set up for visual learners, it's all about reading books. It's all about reading what the teacher has on the chalkboard. It's all about watching the slides. And some people have an auditory learning strategy, and those learners, they do okay in American schools if they listen carefully and they pick up on what the teacher is saying. But if you have a kinesthetic learning strategy, you only are really learning if your body is in motion. And you know what I had to do for Logan? I had to make sandpaper letters. Finally, when he was about 7 or 8, I learned this system. I made sandpaper letters that he traced, and finally the alphabet, instead of being hieroglyphics to him, he got it and he could start reading. And as I worked with my organizing clients through those years, I realized I had a high rate of what I called recidivism. So I would go in, we would declutter, I would create systems for a client, but then a year or two later, they were calling me back. And I realized that I had set up their systems for my retrieval strategy, how my brain remembers where I put something, which is visual. So all I had to have was, file folders with labels on them and in a drawer, and my brain worked really well that way. And I realized, okay, not every client has a visual retrieval strategy. Sometimes they have an auditory retrieval strategy. They remember what the drawer sounds like, or they remember what they were saying to themselves, or the music they were listening to as they put whatever where. Other clients have a kinesthetic retrieval strategy. And those are the clients that if you put something behind closed doors, you've put it into a black hole. They're not going to remember what's what in the file drawer. They need something visual, and they need tactile. They need bright colors, and they need something, baskets or bins that are tactile. And those are the ones that love the open shelves. And I had one who worked as she answered phones for an answering service. And she was always getting bad marks because she was fumbling through her file drawer to find the right file for the script. And what we did is we set up clothesline around the walls. And on each separate wall of her office, we had the script in plastic sleeves hung from the clothesline. So she would answer the phone, see who was calling, go to that script and walk along the room as she read the script. And it worked. It was a system that worked perfectly for her unique retrieval strategy. So like you say, every client is different, and every system that we set up needs to be aligned for that client. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is really easy to make the mistake of setting it up for our learning style rather than for the learning style of the client. It's really that, for me, that was one of the biggest things that I learned from you. And one of the biggest things that's been important when I'm working is to do things that make sense for the client.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say, well, we're all really narcissistic, but sometimes it is hard to get out of our own head and into somebody else's. And the best way to do that is just through conversation and like really observing what the client has going on already. Sometimes it's really evident, people who are visual will have lots of file cabinets, and maybe they're just disorganized, or maybe they can't get through. This is something that I do. They'll put everything in a basket and never file it. And then the mountain gets to the point where it's so overwhelming that you just can't ever file it. It's a mountain I had to climb really recently. And so sometimes it's just.
And usually the reason for that is, so when there's material that's not in the filing cabinet, in the files, usually the reason for that is because there's old material in those file folders that needs to be edited out
Right.
because it's not currently being used. So we have to start with what's in there. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have to go through all the old files and get rid of all the old stuff before you can file the new stuff that makes sense. Um, but sometimes it's just a matter of doing that and streamlining what they have going on, or actually helping a client climb the mountain to get a system that's working and get the organization flowing for them. So, and really that's, there's clearing work that goes on. It's a
Yes.
big part of the decluttering.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
decluttering is clearing, right?
Well, and it is. And what is really interesting is when I begin working with a client, and I do a lot of organizing work remotely. When I begin, whether we're in person or remote, we always start with a space clearing, because what happens is if there's rooms in the home that are cluttered, very often my client has a judgment about the room and about herself or himself because, I haven't gotten this done yet, right? And so every time they come into that room, they're hit with this wall of shame or judgment or, negative energy. We clear all of that, which opens a 4 to 6 week window of opportunity that's like a tailwind to get the job done. The space is clear, the space is welcoming. And what I teach my clients to say to the papers or to the items that haven't yet been cleared is, thank you for waiting for me. Like friends that maybe you're a little late for a lunch date and you text your friends and say, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. Thank you for waiting for me. So to treat the items and the space itself with that kind of respect that you would treat a friend, I can't get to you until, right? You schedule a time. So thank you for waiting for me. And then, you go in and you edit the old and you implement the system. But I found it's really easy to do the skill transference of teaching people how to create their own systems. And really, that's what you and I are there to do. In addition to actually helping them physically, the biggest thing we do is we transfer the skill of knowing how to create the system.
Mhm. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So I would encourage you to try, do a beta test with the client remotely. I actually worked with someone years ago um, who had brain injury. She had traumatic brain injury, and no other organizer had been able to help her. And she said, I'm going to take a risk. I've listened to one of your interviews. I think you can help me. And we started with the space clearing. We did a professional organizing consult for each area that was, kind of a mess for her. And in that consult, we unlocked the reason that she had been unable to get the organizing done. And once she unlocked it, she was able to implement. And there were only a few like coaching sessions of this is how you handle the rest of this. It was so exciting for her to get her space really organized. She even did a feng shui at the end of it. So let's talk about feng shui, because you and I have done a little feng shui work and you've done some training with somebody else. So let's talk about you implementing feng shui.
Okay, would this be a good place to tell the story about my abundance altar?
Yes, yes, I really want everyone to hear that story.
Okay, so I have a whole shelf of feng shui books behind me that I haven't read all of, but it's like something I'm really interested in, but it's never been the prime thing that I'm interested in. I've studied some with Melody. I've studied a little bit online. I've done some work with a local woman who's amazing. And I recently redecorated my bedroom. I had the old wallpaper taken down. Um, some paint. I had the bedroom painted. We got new furniture for the bedroom, something smaller because we have a really small bedroom and we had a huge king bed that just didn't fit. And when we were all done with all of that, I put an abundance altar in the abundance corner of our master bedroom. And I have a beautiful jade plant on there. They're green, their leaves are succulent, they're very juicy. Like this was a lovely thing to draw like succulent, juicy green money to yourself, if that's what you're looking to do. And I put one of the little money plants that you see in all the grocery stores and Walmart and everywhere you go, also on my abundance altar, and some other things that I just felt. I have an altar piece that I created for myself that is what I associate with abundance. And I have this beautiful little altar. I tend it, I keep it clean. Within a week of me putting this abundance altar in the abundance corner of our master bedroom, I had received a gift of $125,000. That is a shocking amount of money, and it has enabled us to completely renovate a huge portion of our home. And I really credit that altar with opening the energy flow for that money to come in. And I also want to say that I credit the fact that I've done a lot of altar tending and altar building to open that flow for years prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah. When you describe the grid on your land, these are altars, right?
Yeah.
They alter the land, they alter us. And I had the same kind of experience when I was first introduced to feng shui. I was an organizer. So I knew that you can change things in your environment. You can transform the environment and it will transform you. The name of my business at that time was Transforming Space, Transforming Self. And so I knew that. And yet it was very difficult for me to believe at that time. This was about 25 years ago. It was very hard for me to believe that you could put a few items in a certain place in your home and it would change a certain staging area of your life. But at that time, my abundance, my finances, I was a struggling single mom and my finances were, really challenging. And so I made some changes in my laundry room and I was stunned when unexpected money, gifts, and other job opportunities started flowing in. My my result wasn't quite as big as yours, but it piqued my attention enough that I continued to study. And I have a wonderful feng shui teacher, several, but honestly, I now understand that just like acupuncture and reflexology understands the system, which also comes from the same 5 element system that feng shui comes from, acupuncture and reflexology are ways to use the meridians, the way energy is flowing through the body, and apply a little attention to a certain area and get a better result in the physical body. And feng shui is that same system superimposed over the body of the home. So there are certain areas of the home that you can up level with an altar, with new furnishings, with certain colors and textures and items that can up level that staging area of your life. And it was when I first began practicing it, I realized feng shui is the best. After we've done the space clearing and after we've organized, it is the best way to partner with the spirit, the energy, the intelligence singing through your space. So for me, when I work with a client to transform their space, we first do a space clearing. We clear the energy, which gives them the motivation and sort of the clarity and the focus, the energy to do the clutter clearing. Once the systems are in place and the home and the workspace is functioning well, that's when we do the feng shui. It's like the icing on the cake. It's like really deepening that love relationship that we have with our homes.
One of the things that I find frequently with clients is that they're already using the appropriate colors in the appropriate areas of their home. They have altars that they don't realize are altars.
Right, right.
are appropriate to whatever gua they're in, it happens so frequently. And it's like, oh, look, you're already doing it, you know?
You
Just,
know what I call these clients un the the unconscious competence. It's like they don't know feng shui, so they're not consciously aware of it, but they're competent with it. They've created what my teacher Denise Lin calls a subliminal altar, because they didn't consciously and deliberately create that altar, but that altar is in the right place doing what it needs to do.
yeah.
Yeah. So so you know, I'm curious about something. The reason I rebranded in this last year to Transforming Space, Self, and Loss is because what I've discovered over the decades of working with clients and getting their homes cleared and organized is that many times the cause, the onset of the clutter happened after a traumatic event. Someone they love died. Um, they had a long protracted illness, or there was a traumatic work experience, or something in their life wasn't, the loss did not get fully integrated. And probably the biggest experience I've had of this, the most, I mean, I've had many, 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 but probably the most vivid was a woman who claimed that she had become a hoarder and she wanted help. She didn't want to be a hoarder anymore. And she had a big, beautiful, beautiful, huge home, probably, you know, well, twice the size of most people's homes. Like, it was huge, maybe 6,000 square feet. And it was in a beautiful setting. But she had filled every square inch of the space to the point that her clothes that she was currently wearing, because she'd gotten larger, um, the clothes that she was currently wearing were hung on racks in the front hallway. And we had to start, I mean, we did a space clearing and we got through, there were little tiny paths through most of the rooms. And we managed to get into every room and clear the space except for some of the closets. And it took months of working. I think in the beginning we worked every day of the week, and then we worked Monday through Friday, and then we worked 3 days a week, and then we got down to 2 days a week because she got really competent with giving things away and throwing things away. But the very last room in that home, and so she had reclaimed, she wanted to sell the house and move. It was much too big for her. And the very last room that we did, and there was a lot of emotions. There are, as you know, there are a lot of emotions that come up when you're sorting through your stuff. There's a lot of thoughts and beliefs and emotions attached to the item. And so we kept clearing, energetically clearing as we went back into the home. And finally, we had made our way back into her closet, her master bedroom closet. And at the back of the closet, as we were taking all the items out that were 10 sizes smaller than she was now, was the outfit she wore the night that she was raped. And as we handled that beautiful outfit, and as she described what had happened, the trauma came out of her body and it integrated as we held sacred space for that life experience. And as that energy dissipated, oh, and in the process, she had discovered the house had termites, right? And the termite nest was literally in the garage on the other side of the wall from this closet. So she got the pest control people in and handled that. And as we finished the clearing, she knew that not just her home was free of that trauma, but she was free of that trauma. It had integrated, and the trauma, the tension around it had dissipated. She, in the next year, she fixed up that home, she remodeled that home, she gave that home the blessing of really loving it, and then she sold it. She also lost a bunch of weight. And I think we just stack on weight, and we stack in possessions to slow things down when we have a trauma we haven't integrated. Have you discovered the same thing with your clients' losses?
You think, Melody? I don't know that I can say that I've worked for long enough with a specific client to have gotten that deep with them. To be perfectly honest, I've worked with some very, very ill people who have just really been unable to do the physical clearing. I've worked with some people who are financially in dire straits and are being supported by relatives, and who the control factor in those situations really comes through and what they keep and what they get rid of. Um, yeah.
So be open to really exploring when you're working with a client. Has there been a loss?
I was just thinking, I have one client who, there's a young man, it's a young couple, and the young man lost his father when he was very young. And he is kind of a hoarder. And so I'm just, I'm learning, listening to you talk. I really am sort of touching in on them and thinking, like, where can I go with that information?
Yeah, and what has been helpful for me, I've been I started organizing in my teens, I started when I was a child with my mother because we moved so frequently, and I was the oldest and, helping my siblings organize their room. But um, what I will do is I will presence. I will ask my clients, do you feel like you kind of lost your handle on keeping your home organized? Was there a specific time, and was there a loss associated with that? And very often I will get, oh my gosh, yes, I went through that really difficult pregnancy and I lost the baby and just things fell apart after that. Or, you know, yeah, my family has always been like this. We've been like this since grandpa died. Or if you go back far enough, there's very often a loss, and people are accumulating as a way of because weight, when we put on weight, it slows our body down. When we put weight into our rooms with items, when we slow the energy down. And when things haven't integrated, um, it can feel overwhelming, and slowing the energy down is one of the ways we deal with that. It's not the greatest coping skill, but it does, it's what a lot of people do.
Yeah, and you can really feel it when you clear a space and when you declutter a space and the energy begins flowing again, everything looks brighter, everything feels lighter. The Not only in the space, but in the people in the space as well, right? Like everything feels different. And it's so worth it to just go ahead and let go. Let go. If you can just stand to let go of it, if you think, I haven't used this in 5 years and I can afford to buy another one if I need it next week, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. I and the way I think about it is that every item in the body of the home, including the floor, the walls, the roofing, the furnishings, the artwork, every item that has physical form is made up of the elements that also make up our bodies and the body of the earth. And there is intelligence singing through those elements. And everything that is created, whether it was created by the divine or created man-made, every item wants to fulfill the measure of its creation. And so when you've got items stuck back in a closet that haven't seen the light of day in 10 years, those items have accumulated stagnant energy. They are not able to fulfill the measure of their creation. But if you were to give them away and put them back into circulation in a way that allows them to be used and loved and valued, you're blessing the item and you're blessing your space, because now you've freed up your space for the chi to be able to flow through your space. So it's a win-win-win. It blesses you, it blesses the space, it blesses the person who receives that item and can use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's been so delightful to talk with you about all of this, because it's been how many years since you did your apprentice training with me? Wasn't it like 2016, 15, 16?
Something like that. I think it's been maybe 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been a while, and we haven't, we talk about a lot of other things, but it's been really fun to talk with you about this.
Yes, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I've learned a lot just listening to you talk. So this has been like a little mini apprenticeship again.
Oh my goodness, I love you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday, and I will look forward to when you're in Western North Carolina again.
Yeah, I hope to see you soon, Melody.
All
Love
right.
you.